All right, welcome, folks. Chris Garlock here. I'm back. Michael Redmond, of course. I'm in Washington, D.C. Michael is in Japan. This is our Sunday night series. We have got a real treat for you tonight, folks. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but we have what is kind of breaking news in regard to the pandemic, which is that the Neon is opening up. I think this week, today, your time, right?
Yeah.
It's Monday
Well, it's
morning where you
starting in
are?
June, and they're going to start with some title game matches and a limited number of tournament games. So, like, they're starting slow and they're keeping more social distancing in the playing room and stuff like that. And but they are starting in the tournaments again. So that after a month or so of no games, the games will be starting. Although they will be slow, but they will be starting. And they'll be taking temperatures and stuff, and masks will be required in their playing room,
Wow.
stuff like that.
So did you like get an official notification and all directions and I mean all
Oh yeah,
kinds of stuff
yeah,
like that?
yeah. It's just that they're going to require masks, and I was wearing masks already before they shut down, so that's okay.
Okay. Any like special go theme masks that would it be providing or
That'd
neon
be
key?
interesting.
Get a
Maybe I
little
should make one.
yeah, get a little branding thing going there. So, yeah, I have to say, I was in the hardware store the other day. Actually, I was getting bird food, and it's the first time in the 2.5 months there were actually masks, at the checkout aisle, nice ones, not too bad, not too expensive. So I bought a bunch. So,
Yeah, good.
and they're nice because you can breathe through them. These cloth
Mhm.
masks I've been wearing, very, very difficult to breathe through.
Yes.
So. Well, that's exciting. So you kind of excited to be looking to get back to tournament play?
Yeah, I'm hoping for it. It will be slow, so I don't really know when my first game will be, but I
Hmm.
am looking forward to it. And
All
Japan as a
right.
whole is sort of opening up. The numbers have gone down enough that they feel it's time to start going back to some kind of new version of being normal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll keep on top of that, see how that goes. But that's exciting. I'm excited for you, and we'll obviously keep us tabs on that. Well, speaking of tournaments, we've got a treat, as I mentioned. This is from a tournament, an online tournament that our friends at Pandanet hosted just a few weeks ago, and
Exactly.
wanted you to tell us about the tournament, and then we'll talk about the
Well,
players.
yeah, there were no one had any tournament games to play, and so people started playing tournaments on the internet. So there were a number of sponsors who helped with that, actually. But Pandanet sponsored this tournament that they called the Golden Panda Cup, and it's sort of like the Nanshin Cup. It's a set of three teams that played of 5 players each that played against each other. And so there was and they were all top professionals. Like, some of them were young players you might not know so well, but like the team leaders were Shibano, Toramaru, the title holder, and Ichiriki, and the other one was Iyama. So those were basically, you could call them the top 3 players in Japan. And even the second players, like Murakawa, and there was Kyokagen, and Mutsuda actually was the second player in the Shibano team. Um, Mutsuda is probably the player that you haven't heard of, but he also was the Golden Panda, because that was the best player award, the most valuable player award that they awarded to the player who won the most games. So in
Hmm.
this tournament system, just the same as the Nanshin Cup, you start with uh, um, the players come out usually in order, and if when you're knocked out every time you lose a game. So if player from team A plays player from team B, and A wins, then next comes the first player from team C, and
Hmm.
then from B again. As long as A keeps winning, he's going to knock out one player from alternately from each team.
So
But then,
last man
for
standing.
instance, if team C beats team A, then next comes up team B, and it's the same thing. So the teams gradually run out of players. So this is something that has been done with teams from Japan, Korea, and China for a few years, and it's a kind of an exciting tournament setup, because actually the teams get to choose. They don't necessarily put their lowest ranked player out first. So actually, you saw Iyama came out fairly early, and he was knocked out in one game actually. So that's an interesting game. He might do it another time. He was knocked out by the Golden Panda. That was Mutsura. So that's another game that I would be interested in doing at some point.
Okay. Yeah, exciting. Very cool. These knockouts are very exciting because, as you say, I mean, you're one and done. If you lose, you're just out. There's no coming back from it. So, and I imagine, as you're sort of alluding to, there's some strategy on the part of the captain in terms of what order you play people in, right?
Right. Yeah. Like you could have a strategy of putting your supposedly strongest player out to start with, and just try to knock out a lot of the players from other teams. But then you're sort of in trouble if your strongest player loses early. So it's interesting.
Need a
but
plan
today
B.
we're going to be doing the two team captains in the final game. So when you have 15 players, you have 14 games because 14 players are going to get knocked out. And so this is the 14th game of the whole set. And it turned out it was between two team captains. So on the whole, this tournament worked out in fairly orderly fashion, where the lowest ranked players were knocked out first, and we ended up with two team captains.
So tell me about the two players when I was working on the story for the e-journal. I noticed, they're, and I didn't look at the whole team, but certainly these two players are fairly young.
All of the players are young. The teams start with, they had one female player each. The female players also are top players, the top female players of Japan. So that would be Ueno Asami, Fujisawa Rina, and Shei Min. So that's the three top players, I would say, of the female players of Japan. And then all of the other players are really, they're very young, but they're probably top players, the top group in Japan. And basically these tournaments on the internet are really good for young players who are used to that, who are doing a lot of playing on the internet. And they're ready to keep up with the time control, which was, I think it was 30 seconds with overtime. So it's sort of like 10 overtimes of 1 minute each or something like that is what I recall.
So when you say 30 seconds with overtime, you mean you have to make a move every 30 seconds?
30 seconds per move, and then overtime periods.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's have you played under those kind of conditions?
Well, it gets difficult to play in that kind of lightning game and play well. I think that's also something that works fairly well for younger players, but gets difficult as you get older.
Wow. Exciting. All right. So just a reminder, folks, we are live. And so that means that you can ask us questions. And if Michael poses me a problem, I will probably ask for your help.
Yeah.
So go ahead. And Stephen, our producer, is also online. He will be helping us to handle the chat. So go ahead and ask questions or make your comments. And we're excited. I mean, we've done historic games. We've been doing the AlphaGo games. We've done some of your games, and so this is a chance to talk about some up and coming players. In fact, I was noticing that Toramaru, he's already well, I guess are they both title holders?
I forgot to really introduce the players.
Yeah.
I thought it was obvious. Well, Shibano Toramaru is arguably the second best player in Japan. Like he has beat Iyama in a title match, so he has one of the big titles.
At 19, I think he was 18 or 19 when he beat him?
He was 19 when he took it. I think it was the Meijin, was it? Yes.
Yeah, it was Meijin. Yeah.
And he was 19 barely, so he made a record because Iyama, when he first took a title, he was actually 20. And it was a close thing, actually, but he was 19 when he took the title.
Wow.
And he's the one player who seems at this point ready to beat Iyama in a title match. Although other players have, I think that Shibano is the one player where it really seems quite realistic that he could just upturn everything and take away Iyama's titles. So I would call him arguably the first or second player in Japan.
And how would you describe his style? What's he known for?
Oh, he's exciting. He's exciting, a very fighting style. He doesn't have any basic patterns. He just does everything. Sometimes he plays computer-like AI type moves, and sometimes he goes against them. Like he can play anything. He's just playing a lot of games. a lot of practice games too, and it's hard to tell the difference between his practice games and his real games because he improvises all the time.
Wow. That must make it difficult for people. I mean, they don't know what they're going to be seeing.
Yeah, he's a very aggressive player. Like he was the player who liked to play the most dangerous variation of the. Oh, you're going to see that today. The most dangerous variation of the 3-3 Joseki, which I did not make an AI Joseki video about because I could not see any way to make it understandable. But I'm gonna take a go at it today.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And do you want to say anything about Ichiriki?
Ichiriki is a very promising. He's a bit younger, I think, but he's a very promising. Actually, he's not younger than Shibano, but he's still a young player. He's very promising, and his problem is that he's the son of a big newspaper, the owner of a big newspaper in Japan, and his father made him go to college because he wanted him to be to follow in his footsteps, and so he has to do two things. He has to keep the option of being a reporter and working at the newspaper because he's already doing that at the same time as beating just about everyone else. So he's one of the most dangerous players, and at the same time, we don't really know whether he's going to continue being a pro if he becomes the president of that company. He might have to quit.
Wow.
So there's a big question mark hanging over. Although he's one of the most prominent players in Japan. At this point, I would probably call him number 3 in Japan.
So this is going to be
Shibano and Iyama.
A very, very exciting game between two up and coming, and as you say, there's even some questions about where one of them may be heading. So right. I'm excited to see these styles. So all right, let's jump right into it.
Okay, the game has started already. You can see that Ichiriki is playing 3-4 points, and he dives into the 3-3 point. So actually, when White plays the Knight's move, just to give you some variations here, the Joseki that I was talking about here is going to happen. Usually Black bumps against White here and plays the Hane, and then White can play away. White can extend. Extending is perfectly okay, although it's not played so much as the Hane underneath now. So locally, White's move is usually the Hane underneath, and then either a double Hane here, or recently it's actually more common for White to play this move, in which case we get into this variation, and the ladder has to do with it. So in this case, the ladder favors White. Yeah, the ladder favors White, doesn't it? This is where I get caught up on a commentary because it's hard. It's relatively easy to see this the ladder favors Black, so Black can just play here, and since White cannot capture in a ladder, White has to play here. And this is actually considered to be an even result. Perfectly okay for Black. Black would probably play something in this corner. The fact that White's lower right cornerstone is on a 3-4 point will make it relatively easy for Black to come into the lower side. So I think this is actually okay for Black, but this is not what Black did. Ichiriki is going to challenge Shibano to a fight already. So Black played here, and this goes into the complicated version of this Joseki. So like I was talking about my own videos, I talked about this. I talked about this move and this move, but I didn't talk about the variation we're going to get into today, because when White plays, actually White didn't play it immediately, but when White plays this move and Black bumps against here, we get into a completely different variation. Because now Black would just capture the one stone, and this would be good for Black. The Ponnuki here, the capturing position here is really good for Black. So White has to find some other way to play, and White's going to extend here. This is where it gets.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't like this, obviously, but this is what's going to happen.
I remember, it's very complicated.
Now, if you really want to avoid it, one way to avoid it for White would be to extend here.
Sure.
And it would be a reasonably even result. In this game, Black would get to play in the upper left corner, which is a pretty important corner enclosure. Black, of course, obviously has the choice of this high corner enclosure. It could be a two-space. It could be probably any of these three, like this move or the large knight's move. But playing that corner enclosure in the upper left corner, in any case, it's going to be in a sort of ideal position for black. So that's why white did not do that. White actually bumped against the black stone in the upper left corner. So white played the start point. And you might recall this move. You saw this move in some of the AlphaGo games.
Mm-hmm.
So it has been played in some AlphaGo games. And modern computer programs, the so-called Go AIs, can often tell you that it's a good move. They give it a good score quite often.
Mm.
So it's comparable with the idea that white could have just played here, in which case black might have just played here. There's nothing wrong with this kind of variation either. But I think just because the fact that it was a lightning game, it was a short time control, maybe he wanted to try something unusual. And it's actually, when I looked at it with, I think it was Leela, it seemed to be okay. This move seems to be one of the options that white has. So black plays a Hane underneath, and in this game, white does want to play on the left side, so white covers here. And this is where black played the Atari. Actually, in general, it's not. This Atari is played as an example that we used to say that this was bad for white. Like people used to believe that that attaching here at the start point was just bad for white. And so we invented an explanation to demonstrate why it was bad. So like you can find this in Go books and stuff, where people are saying that black can play here and play an Atari, and then this variation would be compared with, for instance, let's do it in the upper right corner. Let's say it can be compared with this variation, which is also a joseki, and we would say that the exchange of this move for this move is filling a liberty for white, and it's not good. So are you following with the diagram, Chris?
Yeah. I'm just checking to see if there were any questions from the chat, but I think we're good so far. So yeah.
So this was a diagram that we used to say that white was taking a local loss, and that's sort of part of the equation for white, because white is trying to play forcefully and get some stones in that area with Sente, with a forceful sequence, so that white can go back to the lower left corner, which is still a hot area in this game. So white is ready to lose a little bit. Just filling that one liberty, the 2 mark points in the upper right corner, is not a big deal. And the point is that if white does play that exchange, let's just put that on the board, it becomes identical shape when we compare it to the left corner. So that's what the idea was. But actually, this is just a way that we have to explain that locally white is taking a small loss in filling that one liberty. But going back to this position, I think it's correct to say that black actually does better without playing that Atari and should just connect. Because white's best local move is probably to connect here anyway. And then black would have more of a choice, like black could maybe jump, or black could play a knight's move. And both of these seem to be better than the game move that was here, in which black has played a Hane. So I think that black might have done slightly better without playing the Atari. It's a very subtle difference, though. Like, my feeling is that the next move might be better on the third line like this. Or even if black's going to play on the fourth line, I would prefer this.
Question, in a fast game like this, I would be nervous about some of this complicated stuff. Now, I know these are top level professionals, but still, this is some complicated stuff with some pretty tight time controls. Is there anything to think about in that sort of circumstance?
Well, with these two players, it's really a question of who's setting the trap.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
They've really researched these to a very, very deep level. And their research is gradually changing. Like people talk about using AIs to teach us how to play Go. Actually, in these local corner positions, the AIs are not as valuable as they could be, because AIs can give you a score for the overall position, but it's really difficult to limit the evaluation to what's happening in one particular corner. And sometimes they don't give the optimal moves as humans would see them. And it's very difficult to use them as they are. So what these top players do is they start with the ideas that the AIs give them, and then they do a complete research of the variations that follow. And they come up with a lot of new variations. And so the danger in this position in the lower left corner, which is it's going to be a very sharp fight, is that maybe the fact that Ichiriki played this move, which is on the second line, I'll mark it. The attachment on the second line is a move that is inviting white to get into this very tactically difficult position variation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chance that Ichiriki has found something new that Shibano doesn't know about. And so in a game where you only have 30 seconds for each move, it is very important to get outside of your opponent's plan.
Right.
And it's going to make a big difference in the way you use your time and the danger of falling into some variation where, for instance, your opponent might just know what's going to happen in the next 30 to 50 moves, and you don't have that idea. It's going to be a huge disadvantage.
And we should be clear, it's not like, I mean, if I were pulling something like this, I'd be risking collapse. This is not likely to collapse for the pro, but you could lose enough points that
there are pros and pros. When you're talking about researching these very complicated corner new positions, I think that players like Ichiriki and Shibano, and of course the top Chinese, Korean players, there's a group of players that are way ahead of everyone else, and just one variation ahead, and the ability to sort of lead the game into that variation in an important game. It makes a huge difference. So like you can see pros collapse too. I would be worried if I was in this variation against one of these players.
Even more exciting than I thought. Thank you.
Okay, so white plays here. So now we're going to go into that complicated variation.
Okay, fasten your seatbelts, folks.
Okay, so this is where black is going to cut. Where do you think black's going to cut?
Well, my first instinct was at, let me just sort of switch over here so I can see it more easily. But on the, my first instinct is F5. So of course I'm looking because my first instincts are usually suspect. So I'm wondering if I mean that's my first instinct. You asked me why, I couldn't tell you why, but so I'm wondering if that means I should actually be cutting on the other side.
It's no problem. Both are correct actually. So that was, in a way, it was a trick question. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, really.
So if you cut on this side, this is the game move.
Okay.
And usually this is the relatively simple variation. This is the variation that black can play and not get into so much complications. This is the variation that actually is more played. It's the more exciting one. I want to go into this one just a little bit and show you how white should handle it, because this is the thing that where it usually gets very complicated. A relatively easy way to handle it. So white's shape move here is to play a kosumi on the second line. Mm-hmm. And that's because next a hane in the corner is going to be a huge move. Black will extend here. Now this is setting up a ladder. For instance, if white plays here now, black can just play here. And for instance, something like this. Black has a number of orders of moves that will work, but basically it's a ladder. So this is just a terrible collapse for white. Mm-hmm. White has to do something on the top. White has to do something on the top, but simply playing here, which looks like a normal move, right? It would not be good enough because black would just capture these stones. And there would be nothing white could do about it. So white actually has to fill a liberty here. And we get into this variation where black is still threatening the ladder. White connects. So this is where white had a lot of options, but I'm going to say that white should just connect. This is what I'm going to recommend people remember. Basically, the exchange of this strange little exchange here has filled black's liberties, and it's also setting up a cut at the fourth line. And if black just simply protects against that cut, we get into this fight in the corner, and this is going to be bad for black. White's just going to have that extra room to extend liberties, and black is not alive yet. Black's going to lose the fight to capture, the race to capture. Black's going to lose that. So black has to come down here. This move is pretty much forced when white has played this variation. And it makes the rest of it relatively simple because white can cut here and sacrifice these stones. So this is the variation I'm going to suggest people should play. And it's also the variation that I would feel relatively happy playing. Like I would feel dangerous. There's some other variations where, just to show you. Okay. So there's another variation where white plays here. It gets a lot more heated up. And this is extremely dangerous. I would feel in danger in this variation. It gets really exciting.
A lot of cutting points there.
Detail there. I could talk about this one all day, and I'd confuse everyone, including myself. So that's why I'm saying this is better.
Yeah.
And black will answer here, and this white sacrifices some stones here, but it's not a big deal. Like it's just territory. And white has an advantage on the outside. So this can be called an even trade. I'd be happy enough to play with this as white. In fact, in general, it becomes more difficult for black because although black has more territory, the strategic position is a position where white has options to attack. So white has an easier position to play, to continue playing with.
And black's corner is just a corner. It's never going to be anything more than that corner.
Right. It's a limited amount of territory. This exchange that black has played on the second line has turned out to be a bad exchange. And so there's some negative aspects for black. It should be okay for white. And black just has to invade everything and live all over the place, then black will win. But that's in practice. Like the AIs like to do that, but it's difficult for humans to do that sometimes. So that's what I would suggest white should do, but black cut on this side. So this is the variation that we played decades ago, before we had AIs to tell us what to do. So it's sort of the old-fashioned variation. And here black plays this move, which took me by surprise. And it's actually the move that gets the lower score. It could be that Ichiriki had some ideas to use this variation to change the scene a bit, because the more common move would be to play here. And this would give black a living shape in the corner. So the corner group is perfectly alive. And white has to answer this, because if white plays away, like if white plays something on the side, then white's stones on the lower side at this point, when black extends here, they're almost dead already. Like if white plays this way, black can play here. That's threatening the snapback. And this would be very painful for white, whether black plays here or even this move works. Otherwise, if white jumps on the fourth line, black can push through and cut. And there's going to be a lot of crawling on the second line that white has to do, which is painful, especially as white's not getting any. If white could kill the corner, maybe it would be okay. But since white's not getting anything back, crawling on the second line would be too painful in this case.
Yeah.
So white has to answer that. So when black plays this connection, white's going to play something. The latter favors black. So white's going to play either this move or this move. One of these two. This move is stronger in territory. And then black can move to the left side. So maybe something like this. I like this variation better. I think this would have been better. This kind of fight. It's going to be a running fight starting from the left side. So in the upper left area, it's looking good for black. It's a good flow of stones. There is the drawback that at some point white's going to be able to play this exchange with Sente. So that corner there is a bit squeezed a little bit. But in the other parts of the board, black is taking the offensive. So I think this is perfectly playable for black. And it's the way I would have wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
In the game, black plays this hane. And so with this, black is alive. Locally, this point and this point are sort of miai, but actually black has other ideas. So for instance, white played here and black pushed. This is a very interesting move that white played. It's sort of strange. And in this position, we knew a few years ago, we knew that AlphaGo liked to play this move. This was actually something that I think it suggested. It was part of the information that AlphaGo gave to some Chinese players when they were doing commentaries about its games. And it plays here because the ladder obviously does not work for white. White plays here instead, and black plays here, and white plays something like this. Or locally, white could play. Locally, white could just play here, and this is supposed to be good enough for white. And playing this way, it's sort of difficult for us to be satisfied with this when we're human players, because that black stone, white would have been so much more happy if white could have made it a ponnuki. It's not a ponnuki, not capturing that black stone, having it still on the board is sort of a bit, it sort of bothers me. Mm-hmm. And I think that most human players would still have trouble seeing that this is good for white, although computer programs give it a good score. So white plays here. This protects against the cut on the third line here. And so it puts some pressure on black in the corner. So it's a very human type of move, and arguably better than this one. The hanging connection is the more normal move, but when black pushes here and plays a hane, you can see it's a more restricted position here when black does stuff like this. It's a bit more cramped. So white is just playing that much further towards the side, getting a bit more space. Because when black pushes here, white cannot really continue answering on the left. For instance, if white plays here, white's stones on the lower side are in a lot of trouble now. For instance, if white cuts here, black can just squeeze. And this is just dead. It's like, even though white can...
man.
This looks like it might be a ko, but it's going to be a very distant ko. Like, even if we assume... Actually, it's better for black to play from this side. But this ko, it's just going to be very, very distant. Like it's, I don't know, I can't even count how many steps it is for white to catch up to this ko. It's a very, very distant ko. It's no good for white. So that's bad.
Ouch, 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 ouch.
And if white plays this way, then black's just going to play here and threaten something quite similar to that ko. Slightly different, but again, black will be able to squeeze here, and it's still going to be difficult for white. It's going to be a bit better than before, but it's still going to be very difficult. So that, again, is not so good for white. But if white connects here, sorry, not that way. If white connects here, black will just jump. And this is going to be a bit painful to white. It's going to be pushed down to the second line. So I think this is perfectly good for black. And white actually cannot allow that to happen. So when white played here and black pushed, white had to play on this side. So white had to protect the other side. Black gets to play this nice little hane here. But you can see that this stone here is giving white just a little bit more momentum towards the left side. So both players, I would say, are playing probably according to plan at this point. And this is where the game branches away from what I think should be happening, because black covers here, obviously to make a life in the corner, but white gets to cut this point, which is a very important cut.
Yeah, I've been looking at that. That seems really painful.
It seems a bit painful. So I researched this with, I always forget whether I use both Lila and Katago, and they're both bundled in the same interface. And so sometimes I lose track of which I'm using.
Do you have a preference, or just to sort of grab whatever's handy?
Well, I like Leela's moves better. There is a slight difference in the moves that they suggest, but Katago gives me a score. So, like if I'm doing a game that is not 7.5 points, sometimes I want to know exactly how many points White is leading, because when Leela gives us a winning score to White, sometimes Katago will be giving a winning score to Black, and Katago tends to like Black to start with. It always likes it. In general, it likes Black slightly more than Leela does, I think. But then it also takes notice of the 1 point difference in Komi when we have just 6.5 points, and that will be reflected in the score also. And so when I'm having a game that is not 7.5 points, and it's a game that I think might be fairly close, then I will use Katago to get a point scored. So I forget which one I was using. But then in positions like this, I probably use Leela because I sort of like Leela's moves better. And so I researched it, and as I should have expected, it's perfectly okay for the AI to throw away that corner. And so Black's going to give White the corner. Actually, White's maybe not going to go after it. So like if White plays here to go after the corner, Black will cut once. And Black had this surprisingly effective move, which is
what is going on here?
This is threatening to take this point, which will change everything that happens in the corner. So like if White pushes out like this, then Black can play here, and this is actually trouble for White. Like if White pushes through, we can see the corner coming back to life. It's going to be a ko-like thing, but White's going to be in trouble in this ko also. This ko is trouble for White as well as Black.
Is this even close to Joseki?
No, it's not a Joseki. It's a fight.
Yeah.
White can capture the corner by playing here, but White needs one more move, because if White plays away, Black can play an Atari here, and this is going to be trouble for White. Like if White takes, then Black can connect underneath. If White plays here, this is already bad, but even if Black just plays from the outside, it's not going to be very easy for White. It's going to be some kind of a ko.
Oh my God.
So that would be dangerous. So White actually needs one more move, and this captures the whole corner, but the board position is probably a little better for Black.
Okay, so just for the fans out there.
I remember I was using Leela, by the way, because I remember it was giving something like 48% for Black. So that's a losing percentage, but since actually Black starts with only 43%, Black's winning percentage was up 5%. So like if I had used Katago, it would be in the mid 50%. It would be a little less than 60% probably.
So for the folks at home who just saw Black give away a huge corner.
Should I put that on the board again?
Okay. Yeah, please. I want you to explain to folks why. I mean, I think I kind of feel why, but this seems like a really large corner. So this is okay. I see that Black has
it's pretty close to 30 points.
Yeah.
But Black, like this stone here is not completely removed. So Black does have this forcing move, and in some, like if Black gets a stone
okay, all right,
in the vicinity of here, Black still has that little squeeze that Black can look at. And if Black gets that squeeze from this third line, then the covering on the second line will be forcing next. So it sort of resembles that position we were looking at before, where it was a race to capture between this White's group and the Black group in the corner. So there's still some potential forcing moves from the outside. And it's just the one corner. And when you look at the whole board position, Black just controls the left side and the upper side. The whole board position, you can see that White's not going to be making any more territory in the near future. White's going to be pretty busy trying to handle that group on the left side, and then Black's going to have a huge Morio on the upper side. Black's just, the control of the board position is so total that Black can catch up that 30 points. And Black already has something like 15 points in the upper left corner, so it's not as if Black has to capture has to make a whole 30 points here. Black just needs 10, 20 points more, and it'll be a close game on the territory too. You don't look like you believe me, Chris.
No, I do. I love to play this way, but it makes me very nervous. That's a nervous look that you're saying. Everybody's asking about if I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm just, this is a very exciting, way to play. But I mean, it's just.
Well, yeah. For me, the amazing move was Black 5 here. This move on the second line.
Yeah.
Actually looking at that move on the second. If White plays here, Black is looking at this move, which is going to be real trouble. Like if White takes the one stone here once, then Black can connect here. And this is bad for White too, because White's in danger of White's group here is sort of short of liberties. It's very short of liberties. And it's in trouble. Like if White plays here, White's already going to lose the fight to the race to capture. White's already losing this race to capture. Like White only has 1, 2, 3, 4. White only has 3 moves. White only has 3 liberties, so White's losing by 1 move.
That is some serious, and that's some serious reading, especially in a short time game too. But as you say, a lot of this was already figured out.
Well, Black didn't play this move, so I don't know if if he had researched it, maybe he would have known that and already figured it out. I think that even for a top player, figuring out this whole sequence is something that would take some time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And if White avoids that fight, it's probably better for White to answer somewhere on the left side, in which case Black will be able to cover here and live in the corner. So that would be, in that case, Black will have avoided being cut at this point, and it'll make a big difference. So this would be okay for Black. I like this for Black. Something like this. Actually, Leela was giving away the corner again. But this one, it's a lot of bad Aji in the corner. Like Black can still play stuff like this and stuff like this, starting a ko. And if White connects the ko, then it's sort of troublesome when Black does stuff like this. And you can see White is running out of liberties here. So this kind of fight would be just too dangerous. If Black does do this kind of thing, it will end up being a ko with White playing something, for instance, something like this on the outside. So Black still has that ko there. So again, Leela was throwing away the corner and starting stuff on the side and leaving that corner for the time being as dead. And Black is still hoping for a big moyo on the upper side and the left side of the board maybe. Again, it's a position, giving up the corner like this is difficult for human players. It would be difficult for me too. But it's not completely dead yet in this case. So there's there's a ko waiting to happen there. This would probably be about even. So to get back to the game, Black actually protected the corner. So White got to cut here. And I think this gives White a slight advantage. Black jumps out, and White jumps out too. So White is taking territory on both sides. And if Black is just going to be floating around in the center, so White has potential to get a big area here also. So Black has to fight back here. So in this game, Black will continue with this move. It makes it really exciting. And White extends. Black gains a move here. And Black played here, the Knight's move. And the Knight's move is a bit loose. I think maybe better for Black to play the attachment, actually.
I was just looking at that. Does
the
that
usual
work?
strategy is to play the attachment and the double hane.
Right.
Because if White plays here, Black can cut and capture the... Oh, sorry, not that one. That was just a misclick. Black can capture... This would be obviously good for Black. So White cannot wedge here. If White cuts here, then Black can still do this, and that works for Black also. And in this variation also, Black will be getting the 3 cutting stones. So that would be bad for White. Therefore, when Black does this, White's going to have to back off a little bit and probably play here. And this is more or less alive. Like at this point, playing on a target against the two stones is no longer forcing. So if black played that now, white would just escape on the outside. And those two stones are not connected to any of black's outside groups. So white can just sacrifice those. If black plays something like this, white will wedge here, and we would get into something like this. This is a nice little exciting variation here. Something like this. And white cannot capture black on the outside, but as long as white is threatening a ladder or something, all of these moves will be forcing, and eventually white can come back here and live. So this is a fairly dangerous variation for black with a lot of weak black groups on the outside. Probably not so good for black. It's still very complicated, but probably not so good.
Very busy, so, very busy.
So maybe black's going to play here, or actually maybe not that way, maybe this way. And white has to add a stone to be alive. And then after that, things will return to the center of the board. I mean, it's going to be very complicated. This seems to be a more a stronger shape for black on the left side. Black's position here with a fairly well-connected shape. So black might continue with something in the center like this. A very difficult fight. I don't really know what's going to happen, but that means it's probably close enough for a human player. So this seems to be a bit loose. I don't really like it, but it's hard to tell for sure. And now white plays on this. This is a really weird move that Shibano played. Like white could have lived very easily, but like white was alive from the start. One way white could have lived would be just to play here. That would have been easy enough. But this move, it seems to be a double threat. So first of all, like if black continues with something like this, and black can capture the one stone here, there's the weakness on the outside here. And there's also the fact that white can pretty much surround black on the outside here. And white's going to win the fight to capture, the race to capture. And a big problem that black has is that at any point in this fight, this is never going to be forcing. It was never forcing to start with. It was, at any point, if black had played that cut, it would not have been forcing. It's virtually impossible to find timing in this fight where black can cut at the mark point on the third line and have white answer that. And so that's a big problem for black.
The sequencing is really tricky, right?
And that means that white always has the option of playing this mark point and getting what is white could make a living shape there with a various orders of moves. So white is basically threatening this. It's a kind of a net on the outside. If white does play that, let's just go back into that variation. If white does play that, it's almost impossible for black to escape. Like if black does stuff like this, black's just black's still going to lose the fight to capture. Like if white plays stuff like this, you can see black is really short of liberties. Only has 4 liberties now. So it's probably
just looks so awful. It's I'm trying to count how many empty triangles there are. It is just a god awful shape, right?
Yeah. So and at this point, black is only has about 4 liberties on the outside, actually, because white can throw in it here at any point. So black is pretty short of liberties and is going to lose this fight, even if it turns into a race to capture.
But the worst thing could be if you know black just manages to live with that little, you know, I mean,
it's not going to live. It's just
of course it's not going to. I mean, it's just this liability, you know.
So black answered on this side. So this was sort of forced, and so the idea behind this move was that it was forcing on the right, and white was looking at this move, which is a kind of a vital point. Like
yeah.
The idea is that if black answers with something like this, then white will get this move in as a forcing move, and that improves white position on the left side. So like white would probably continue with something like this. So that's the general idea that white has here. The forcing at the third line at 2 is obviously it's very important to connect white stones that way. So that's the idea white had with this stone. And after white plays here, it's very difficult for black to find an effective local move. So black pushed here. I mean, black covered on the 4th line here.
Oh, wow.
So black is
all right.
The good. What I like about this move is that when black is not obstinate in doing stuff like this, which would be getting into a bad fight on the left side of the board, when black plays away like this and says, just go ahead and take the left side, actually those stones on the left side are fairly light, with the potential of black playing here to capture 2 stones, or potential to play something on the outside to move out towards the upper left area. So once black is just sort of taking it easy there and just saying, go ahead and capture them, it actually is relatively difficult for white to find an ideal way to capture those black stones.
Interesting. Yeah.
And white continued with this move, which is continuing the attack. But we're going to see that black managed to get some sabaki out of that. So black managed to fix the shape a little bit. I think white would have done better to continue attacking on the lower part of the board, which would be more exciting. But white is alive on the lower side here. And black's group in the center is still being put under a lot of pressure. And obviously this group too, I think locally it's just a very difficult fight for black with these 2 weak groups. And if we look at the left side, for the time being, white has the potential to capture 2 black stones with a move here on the 4th line. Or if white adds a stone to the left side, it's going to be alive. So provided this white group on the left side here is alive, and it is, then the rest of white's stones, like those 3 stones in the upper left, are not relevant to the fight that we're having on the lower side of the board. And so white can afford
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if black captures them. The fight on the lower side, if white captures one of these 2 black groups, is probably going to be decisive. So it's a very hot spot on the lower side. Those white stones in the upper left are no big deal at this point. So if white does play like this very forcefully on the lower side, then they become less valuable. Like it just makes the lower side so much more important.
So I gotta ask you 2 questions. Give you a chance to have some of your tea there, or whatever it is that you're drinking first thing in the morning. 2 things. One is, I mean, we've been looking at all these AlphaGo games, and am I, this is feeling definitely AI influenced in terms of the flexibility and the lightness and just the willingness to move all over the thing. And secondly, and I'm just thinking, you're going to be getting back into tournament games. I mean, how are you going to feel about facing, one of these young guys who's so steeped in all of these moves, and can do this kind? I mean, this is tough. I don't know.
I'm definitely not going to get into this Joseki yet.
You're going to choose a simple one, right?
I'm going to choose a simple one, yeah.
Okay.
Something that I know about. I know about this one too, but I also know that there are variations that these players know that I haven't seen yet. Basically, that's the danger.
Okay.
Like if I have something like 5 or 6 hours, which they don't give us anymore, but we used to have 5 or 6 hours. In that case, maybe I could think about it for a couple of hours and figure something out. Yeah. So that's the way people used to play Go.
Yeah. We're down those.
That would be difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so white cuts on the left side. So this took some of the heat off of black because black did get to continue here. And now black plays here. So now black is really heading towards sacrificing some stones and just trying to get something out of the left side. Like black, the fact that white spent 2 moves on the left side, that's marked the 2 white moves that white used on the left side. White used 2 moves here. The fact that white added those extra stones actually makes it easier for black to just sacrifice most of the stones on the left side. And black is getting something back on the lower side of the board. So black plays here and here. And, oh, sorry. I didn't want to show you the preview of that. Okay, so black scrolled on the second line. And this is where I was going to give you a problem. So why don't we take a look at this? First of all, do you see what black is trying to do?
It looks to me like black is trying to make the attack in the upper left to be much larger scale. That's one thing that I'm seeing.
Okay, just to
And
give you a hint here, this crawling on the second line here for black is a double attack.
right, because
Threatening to,
inside and outside, right?
this is going to be a ladder.
Right.
Otherwise, black is threatening to play here. So it's a double threat.
Yeah, yeah.
So the question is, what does white do to counter that?
I mean, it looks like C8 should be C8 looks Sente-ish.
C8. You must be talking about this. Yeah, this one, right? That's a ladder.
Oh, right. There's too many things to keep track of. Oh dear. Right. Yep. That's not going to work. Looking for something clever. I'm not getting any help here either. and you know yeah, somebody talked about I was looking at the cut at
this one, right?
The cut at D10, right?
Yeah. That works. That was the game move.
All right, Peregrine.
So good move. Here, white can just
Good
capture
one.
stones. And the point is that it gets rid of this move by filling a liberty, and it also gets rid of the ladder. So
right. Excellent, very clever.
So after showing you that, I'm going to go back a few moves and show you another way black could have done it. Black could have played here. This is forcing at this point. It would be too painful, I think, for white to allow black to do this at this point. It would be a squeeze from the center. I think this would be forcing, in which case then black could crawl here and capture the two stones. However, in this case, this exchange here is really bad for black because it just finishes off these three stones. These three stones are just dead now. So white actually needed this stone in the center to finish off those black stones, and this stone that is stuck to white's stones is just bad. So white could play another move like this, for instance, in the center. And this would be a very difficult fight for black locally. And so black is getting into trouble in the center of the board. So if we compare it to that, if we compare that to what happened in the game, where black played only one person, then played here. Now if white does this, sorry, not that way, this way. White needs one more move to capture these stones because they still have so white would be playing anyway, and then black would have a different way to use those two stones. Black would not save the two stones here, but would sacrifice them, and this would be okay for black. In this case, black has got a living shape on the left side, it would be okay. But the fact that in the game variation, I mean, in the variation that's not the game variation, if black has a stone here sort of stuck to white's wall, even if white attacks it this way, it's bad for black. It's just too much. It's heating up that local fight that is just bad for black. So it's a very touchy order of moves here. Maybe this was the only order that black could choose. But black did get to play here, and then black pushed here. Well, actually, black played away once, yeah. So this way,
black pushes. I've been wondering about that slide, yeah.
It doesn't quite work, but it does have to do with the corner. We'll finish the shape in the upper left first. Black is again threatening a ladder, and also capturing the white stones here. So the only way white can answer is to capture the two stones. So black is getting some territory in the upper left corner. Some question as to whether black should have played here or here. In either case, black is sort of threatening a squeeze. So white answered this way. So that ends the fight there on the left. And maybe slightly better for white, but the fact that white has not had a chance to take advantage of this cut here means it's pretty close to even, actually. It's a pretty close to even position.
Wow.
And I would like to talk about the lower left corner for a bit, because it looks like white can kill it with this move.
You know, actually, so they were just asking, and I was just wondering about that, about what's the status in that lower left.
Usually, if you were given this as a life and death problem, in basic life and death, this is just dead. It's a dead position.
Right.
In this position, actually, black can play here or otherwise throw in here and play here. In order to kill it, white would have to play here and here. And if we're assuming it's not going to be a ko, white will play here. This is going to give trouble for white on this side when black squeezes like this. And white cannot connect on the third line.
Oh, goodness.
So that was the whole point of black playing that slide, the large knight slide there on the second line. Black was setting up this Tetsuji here. And this is going to have to do with stuff that happens much later in the game, actually, so it's interesting. The point was that without that context, it was no problem for white, because white could just play here and capture, and black cannot try to kill the white group. For instance, if black plays here, it's just a collapse for black. So white is perfectly alive until white tries to kill the black corner. So when white tries to kill the black corner, and black does this kind of stuff, then white loses that extra eye, and now it's a big problem for white when black does this. Or actually, in this case, it looks like black could have changed that and even just connected on the third line. Yeah, I just realized that. So even this works, because black can squeeze from this side.
That's right.
So when white doesn't have that extra eye, which is filled with white 9 right now, when white doesn't have that eye, this is just going to be a problem for white. It'll be a kind of a ko-like position against the corner, but that's already a failure. Wow. So white doesn't really have a good way to kill the lower left corner. And that means that whether or not white gets to cut here at some point is going to be very, very important. So that sort of connects to my idea for the next black move. Because I think black should have, well, actually, I had some help from Leela, but I'm convinced that black should have played the attachment here. And that might look strange to you. That might look strange to you.
Yeah, it's so close.
Just for context, have a look at the game move. The game move was here. Oh, sorry, he played once here. The game move was here.
Are you serious?
That's serious, yeah. So it's actually a similar idea. The idea is quite similar. The fact that black already has this position here, moves like this would not be satisfying. Even if we just look at the lower right corner, black is not getting enough space for that little wall that black had on the lower side. So this is just too cramped.
Yeah,
it actually makes sense for black to be going this far. But just taking that one step further, it's better to play here, because now if white extends, if white plays here, for instance, black can hane into the corner. So the idea is that black is getting more room in the corner. In the game variation, white was able to play the hane here, which is an important point. So when black plays this way, if white plays the hane, then black gets to curl into the corner, taking away the whole corner. Like, this would be so much better for black, taking away the corner. If white plays down to stop that, then black can continue by extending. And the value of this variation is that it naturally, in a natural sequence, black has gotten rid of the cut here. And getting rid of the cut is very important, because by stabilizing the status of this black group on the outside, black needs to keep that group stable in order to have a safe to be continually be able to save the lower left corner. So we went into that variation where white tried to kill the lower left corner with this move. It all depends on black having a stable position on the outside. Like if one of these outside black stones, if some of those stones were captured or something, that would change the status of the corner. So that's why I'm saying it's very important for black to get rid of that cut at the mark point on the 5th line. And this would actually be a pretty much even game, as far as and as I was saying, I was using Leela, so the winning percentage thing is a bit tricky. It's not completely accurate as far as the 6.5 point Komi is concerned. So I'm guessing to a certain extent, but I think it's a pretty close game. For humans, it would be close enough to be interesting anyway.
Right.
In the game, black chose this one, and it was just not quite as good because white was able to play the Hane here. So just to go with the attachment once more, if white extends here, you can see that white has not been able to play that Hane on the 4th line. So it would be so much easier for black to be doing something like this and have a nice position there. The fact that in the game, white got to play this Hane while keeping the corner territory made it that much better for white.
Yeah, black really does look pretty cramped now.
And this is the point where the game starts to look a little bit difficult for black. At this point, although there was all that fighting, a lot of black stones were captured. I think it was still okay because black was still getting a lot of points back in the upper left. And so black had some territory. If we had gone into that other variation, let's see, something like this, for instance, this would be perfectly fine for black. In this variation, it's going to be really difficult for white to... I showed you that variation where white tried to kill the lower left corner.
Right.
That is actually pretty dangerous for white. So if we assume the lower left corner is alive, then white doesn't really have that much territory. Like black might, it's arguably black has a lead in territory. Black has this forcing move in the center. So capturing those weak black stones, they're actually a bit difficult to capture, and black's ready to sacrifice them, but they're not so easy for white to capture because black does have that forcing move from the center, and otherwise black does have that corner in the upper right. Potentially black has a lead in territory, so I think this is a close game at least. But when white gets the Hane here, it means that if black plays here, we have white extending. White has a much better position towards the right side of the board, the upper half of the board.
There's a question here, which I think that you may have partially answered, which has to do with whether white can ignore the corner. I think what they mean is in exchange for the cut. So I suspect what they mean is when black attaches, can white go ahead and cut right away?
Yes. Well, that in that variation, black might actually be playing away. That would be something that would be very difficult to understand, actually. Like if black attaches here and white cuts, black will probably just continue on this side. It would lead to some kind of a huge trade. It will cost one more move for white. And like it's not as if white is going to be taking these 2 stones off the board. This actually could potentially change the status of the corner group. But black would be getting a lot back also. So I don't know. As far as territory is concerned, black's gain is much larger than white's locally.
Interesting.
So I think even with the added factor of the lower left corner getting a bit more into danger, I think this would be probably playable for black.
Good question, folks. Thanks.
So yeah, this was the game. White does get to play the Hane. And it's sort of a shape move for black to play this Hane and make the threat of the 3rd line cut there. And so white answered that this way. And now black playing something submissive like this, it looks like it's probably going to be a small lead for white. Like I think even a professional player like myself, for instance, I would probably be satisfied with something like this or something like this because it seems reasonable for black to be adding a stone just to get rid of that cut on the 5th line. But I think that it's probably correct to say that white does seem to have a small advantage in this board position. So at this point, black is trying to play actively. And black starts with the peep here. So this is an interesting move. If white covers on the second line, black will get the hunted with sente. So that's the whole idea here. This would be okay for black.
Mm.
So white connects, and now black continues with this move, looking to connect underneath, putting some pressure on the white group. And so if white plays something very submissive, like if white played something like this, then black would be fine with probably play this way anyway. And that would be a huge difference on the right side. So white counters with the cut. And in this case, it's going to be relatively difficult for black to kill white in the lower right corner. So white extends here. And like at this point, black could play two moves towards the left side, and it would still be like if black played something like this and white played something like this to capture black in the center, black would still not be able to kill white in the corner like this. White would probably start here. This would just not work. White would capture 3 stones on the side, and so it would not work for black. There's even with if black plays 2 moves in a row there at this point, there's going to be no way for black to kill that white group in the corner. So black has to answer on this side, and white got to play this move. With this, white is pretty much connected up. Like black played here, and at this point, black stopped playing. Like escaping with this stone is just such a clumsy, unhappy shape. Already,
oh man!
With the forcing move here, and at this point, already there's no way for black to save that stone on the second line. So white's pretty much alive in the corner. So that's just such a clunky shape that black could not bring himself. I think players like Ichiriki or players at this level have trouble even seeing that kind of move. Yes, it's just so ugly. So black switches to this side. And white does have to be careful. You can see that black does still potentially have a lead in territory. Like black has more than 20 points in the upper left corner, and a few points on the lower side, a few points if we assume the lower left corner is alive, a few points there. So black is well over 30 points. And if all these stones floating around in the center of the board, if they're going to be difficult for white to kill anything, white doesn't really have that much of a big territory. So there is still potential for black to take a lead in territory. And that was probably just a time-saving move. This move is actually, there's a very subtle effect, which I've been talking about already. It's not a very effective move, and one gets the illusion that white was getting rid, for instance, of a black move here, but that's not the real reason for white's move. Like there's the fact that if black played this way, black could save those cutting stones. But that's it's just kind of an illusion there. It's not actually a practical move, because in any case, white could have played a forcing move here and cut, and it wouldn't have been working for black. So it's just a kind of a optical illusion that black might have something there. It's not actually going to happen. So you get the illusion that maybe white was worried about that or something, but actually the reason for this move is completely different. For the time being, it's threatening to cut black off with a move at the mark point. So it's aiming at the weakness at that 2-space extension, the 2-space jump, I should say. And so black answers on this side. And now, with that exchange in, the black corner, the lower left corner, is now in danger, because white has this snapback here. Now white has the snapback.
Oh, that's right.
So white was threatening to cut the 2-space jump, and pretending that white was getting rid of the stuff here. Well, I think people at this level do sort of pretend a little bit, even though it doesn't work. Like it's just something that they do naturally. But actually, white was just securing the lower side. So white had completely read out that danger that of going after the lower left corner by making this snapback possible. White has actually made it possible for white to continue with a move here to kill the lower left corner.
Yeah.
If white does this now, black might actually continue with this move and start attacking white on the outside. So white actually continued on the outside a little bit more with this move, White's just going to attack black here for a bit and reduce the threat there. And then white's going to go after the lower left corner.
Oh, man.
So actually, it's conceivable that black could have played. When black plays in the corner, I think black's going to start with this move. And white cannot go down on the first line. This would just lose the stones. So that doesn't work. White would just connect here or play. If white plays locally, this is what white would do. Like this or like this, I guess. And then black would add a stone. In actual play, white might just leave it for a bit. If black played here, sorry, I got into a different variation. If black plays here, white might just leave it and play something on this side. And you can see that white's active move here made the follow-up move here a more effective move. Like if we compared that to white playing something submissive like this and black playing here, then you can see the right side position is a bit different when white gets to play something more effective. Like if black plays here and white plays here, it's a much more effective position white has on the right side. So in this position, I would say it's probably a slight advantage for white. White does have this strong position in the center of the board, where this whole black group is still very, very weak. And white is starting to get the territory back by taking some territory on the right side. And so the fact that black has something like 30 points, it looks like white will be getting it back in bits and pieces. Like there's something like close to 15 points on the left side, and it looks like the right side is going to size up to something like 15 points too. White has a few points on the lower side. So the territory is close enough that white can rely on this attack that white has in the center of the board to have an advantage. I think white has an advantage in this position. It's not a huge advantage, but it's probably enough. So black played here. So black didn't really want to play something really low like this, because like this would just allow white to play some forcing moves. It's going to get black into trouble into the center, and eventually white will be able to get back to the lower left corner. Like it will just make too many things that black has to do.
There's so much to keep track of.
So black is going for a trade here. With this trade, black is actually the fight in the center is changed, because with this forcing move here, probably a couple of pushes will be forcing. It means that white's going to have trouble saving those stones in the center. So the tables have been turned in the center. These white stones here, let's mark the white stones. These white stones will have trouble escaping, because if white does something like this, black will just push here. And white really has two problems to deal with. White really wants to play on this side, but if white does that, it's just going to be trouble in the center. There's also the fact that when white plays an ice move and does something like this, white's not really connected up either because of this weak point here. And so it's just not really going to work for white. But the good thing about this is that now white is okay on the right side. So white just sacrifices those marked stones and kills the corner. So this is it is a huge move. Like, let's see, I counted it once. It's something like 35 points.
Yeah,
I forget what my count was exactly, but it's a huge move. It doesn't have anything to do with the general fight, but since white has this stone here, this is a chance for white to kill the black corner. It's just dead now.
Just like cashing out your chips when you get a little advantage there.
White has a little advantage. White can afford to sacrifice these stones in the center, although that does give up the whole attack that white was setting up.
Right.
If we look at the territory, black has something like 40 points now, and white has more than that in the lower left. So white has a noticeable advantage in territory. Let's see. Wow. White has something close to 50 points in the lower left now, and white does have some territory on the right side. So it looks like white has a fairly solid lead in territory here. So I say in a lightning game, this positional judgment was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and no, I mean, really sharp, right? I mean, just yeah.
And at this point, it is a difficult fight for black. Ichiriki is going to keep it very interesting. So we'll just go a bit further.
Wow.
White invades here. You can see he's not holding back at all. And that was forcing. Let's just go into the variation where black plays this one. Just to show you that this doesn't work anymore. At this point, white would still have that. So if black plays this way, for instance, white would just connect to the center. It would be no problem for white at all. And so it's just not working for black.
Wow. That is really impressive.
Yeah, so white was just waiting for that. So black had to play here, and now white answers on the lower side. So it makes complete sense. Now white is going to be alive, even if black does that. It's just a live shape. Like black can get rid of the two eyes inside, but then white would have an eye here. Or black could get rid of black could have gotten rid of the eye on the outside, in which case white would have two eyes inside.
Nice. Nice, nice, nice.
And so now white's taking an offensive on the right side, and black's going to try to mix up what happens on the right side. So black plays here, and this is an impressive move. It's just creating the potential of a squeeze by pushing through here. And more importantly, basically, it's just making this move forcing. So the way white is countering black's attempts to make things confused is very solid and impressive. And also, I was impressed by the next white move. For the time being, black is threatening to play on the second line here to make an extra eye. But if white plays here, then black's going to play an attachment here, and it looks like black might have enough room to make a living shape. So white played a move that foiled both of those ideas. Do you want to try to find it?
Oh, man.
It's actually a very difficult move to find. Maybe I shouldn't have given you that problem.
I mean, I'm just looking at I'm looking at S12 for some reason. I have no idea if it works, but just S12
is on the second line.
Mm-hmm.
No, the third line here.
It's a white move, right?
Yeah. For some reason, I have it in this. I opened the page in a different program, so I'm not sure what S is. Is that the third line from the right side?
Such a second line.
Oh yeah,
it's and
that's what I thought you might say. Yeah. This one would work to an extent, but there would still be the oddity of stuff like this. And if white plays this side, then black can play here. So it's a bit weak on the outside.
Not quite, yeah.
Or even if black goes just one move at a time with some stuff like this, this would still be a bit of a problem there. So handling that weakness towards the outside actually is what white needs to do here. So playing on the second line sort of highlights the point that was the weakness.
So probably Q12 then maybe, but that seems to the one
that would be a bit too easy.
Too submissive, yeah.
Much room. So it's in between those two. So this was
just bumping it straight, really.
So this is setting up. So now if black plays this side, white can just play here, and that will connect up to this stone. Like if black.
Oh yeah, nice. Okay, that works.
And otherwise, when black plays on this side, that exchange has sealed the outside. It's just made the outside that much safe. And it's such a simple and effective move that sometimes you could easily miss it. But when you see it on the board like this, it just gets rid of all the complications. It makes it very easy. And so it's the kind of simple move that is obvious when you're going through the game afterwards. But sometimes it's a blind spot when you're playing. And this position is pretty much over. Like the ladder favors black. We're going to see black try to make use of that, but at this point, black sort of gave up on the ladder idea and played from the outside. So, like if black plays here, white cannot capture it in the ladder. It looks sort of enticing, but actually does not work. At this point, white has more than one way to chase black, but that black stone on the third line there is in the way. So that doesn't work. But white can just run out on this side and play on this, maybe play once here, play on this side. The fight to capture is pretty hopeless for black, the race to capture. Like if we have something like this happen, black's just so short on liberties. Like if we assume something like this, white has 5 liberties on the outside. Black only has 2 liberties. So it's,
even I can count those.
Yeah. So it's really a very difficult for black to get anything out of the race to capture. And white did answer here. White didn't even need to answer that. But this new move is a nice. I like that move. It's just a bit more effective than playing something like this. Just giving white an extra tempo on the upper side. Really finishing off this game in class, I'd say. And again, this point, can you see that there's a way for white to capture those 2 black stones?
The ones that
these 2 black stones. These 2 black stones are 2 stones that white can capture, but white doesn't really want to capture them. So it's kind of
yeah. I mean, you can just
bump against, and this would be a terrible move actually, because capturing the 2 black stones, it doesn't even give white an eye. It would just be a clumpy shape. So actually, this is a case where another position where I'd say that strong players like these 2 players, like Shibano or Ichiriki, might even have trouble seeing this move because it's just so obviously bad.
Right.
And the game move is the shape move to play here, sacrificing a stone. It's a good example of how sacrificing a stone is so often much better. Black can cut here and capture the 1 stone, but actually there's something left there. So at this point, the game ends. So we don't get to see it happen. But for instance, if black continues trying to attack white here with something like this, for instance, white does have a ko there in the corner. White can cut here and here and here. And after this, white has a number of ways to make it into a ko. Like white could just, in this case, white could just play here and play here. It would be a ko. Usually it's better to throw in. And then it's going to be a step ko. It's going to be a 2-step ko, but white will have an advantage in this ko. At this point, black has no way to settle the ko. Like even if white takes, even if black finds a ko threat, if black finds a ko threat and takes back, there's no way for black to resolve this ko yet. So like connecting here would just lose. So black has to, it would still be a ko. And so it's just a very difficult ko for black to win. And white's okay on the outside too. It's not as if white's about to die on the outside either. So at this point, Ichiriki did resign.
Wow. It's a fascinating game because it is played so much of it, on knife edge for both players. Neither one of them is giving a millimeter, pushing and then, the fight's moving from place to place. But it's interesting because at a key point, white just sort of takes control.
Well, I think the cut here, even before that, I was saying that white should have cut earlier, but the cut here was really pretty decisive, I'd say. But the fact that white got to cut here, and then after a while, white got this forcing move in, which affected the marked move in this variation diagram, which affected the lower left corner. The fact that the status of the lower left corner was hinged on this fight on the outside, it all had to do with this cut that white got on the 5th line here. So this cut was a turning point.
But Black never really, at least in your analysis, Black never really had a way to cover. Well, I guess
It was this move. Basically, it was this move where this was Black's chance to play the attachment here. And if we
right,
assume a variation like this,
right.
then Black has, this would actually be, I'd be happy to play with Black. It's probably close enough. Not a big difference either way.
Mm.
So this was still a position which I would argue is pretty close. I think if earlier, if White had played this move at the cut, I like this better for White. Actually, if we go back one move and say White cuts on the fifth line, even at this point in the game, I think the cut on the fifth line was important, and it would have given White an advantage.
Mm.
So this complicated fight that started in the lower left area is really very, very difficult to follow. But I think that the cut here on the fifth line, when it didn't happen here at move 52, and when it did happen later in the game, let's see, later in the game when White cut here, this really was decisive in the game. So it was all hinged on this cut, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, fascinating game. Really, I mean, it's especially with all the time we've been spending with the AlphaGo games. It's really very satisfying to see, this new generation of players really putting all of this new knowledge to work, but in a very, can I say human way, right?
Yeah, I think it's very important to note that while they do have learned from computers programs, they also have their own unique understanding of how those moves work. So they're using a lot of computer moves, but they're using them in a way that is sort of unique to humans. They're combining that with their like the research of this position in the lower left corner. It would be very difficult to get this just from a computer program. They have to research all of the variations on their own, just because the computer programs don't want to go into those variations, and they play away when you're trying to get a local result, stuff like that. And it's very difficult to get a local joseki in the way that we used to think of josekis. It doesn't work that way with the computer programs. And so the strong players will be researching those shapes, the local shapes on their own to a certain degree.
Yeah. That's what's kind of neat to me about, and I'm looking forward to looking at some more of these modern games. And just so folks know, we're going to be kind of jumping around. I think our next, there was a question earlier about our next historic game. I think we're going for the 1930s for our next historic game, if I'm not mistaken, in a few weeks. I think we were talking about.
I think the idea was one of the Jubango games between Goseki and Kitani.
Yeah. But, it's cool. I'm really having fun jumping around, to these different eras, the real ancient eras, and jump up to some sort of more, I can't call the 30s and 40s modern, but a game like this, which is really, just a few weeks old, and also clearly such, these are the two players who had come through. You said this was game 15 in a 15 game series. So
it's a 14 game series. Yeah,
14.
With 15 players in the knockout, you have 14 losers, so 14 games.
Right, right. And as you were mentioning, there's still some other interesting games to look at. So again, we should just big thanks to Pandanet, A for having the tournament, and B for permission for us to bring it to you. Pandanet's got some great stuff. I've got a link there for you. But really exciting game. I gotta say, I always think the human games are easier than the AlphaGo games, but that was not the case here. This was a tough game.
It was a tough game, and it's pretty amazing to know that they played it in those time conditions.
Yeah. No, that's the thing that I was just sort of boggling my mind was, when we see the AlphaGo games, I mean, the AlphaGo just, sure, it doesn't need DNA time, but for human players to be doing this kind of, I don't care if they did think it out first, they still had to play it in those really tight time constraints.
Well, only the first moves, pretty soon it gets into a new variation anyway.
That's right.
Not as they've researched 100 moves of it.
Well, Michael, as always, Great commentary. Thanks so much for your in-depth analysis. I hope folks enjoyed this half as much as I did. I saw people were really sort of paying attention, some really good questions. So thanks for that. This will be posted on our YouTube channel. And of course, check out Michael's brand new YouTube channel and his Twitter feed. I think Steven's got links up for that. He's got lots of fun stuff that he's putting up. We may have some news for you next Sunday. We're going to sit on that for the moment. And of course, as always, thanks to the US Go Association. That's at usgo.org. I should say the American Go Association at usgo.org. Lots of cool stuff there. If you want to join the AGA, we would welcome you wherever you are. And as we always say, let's keep the life and death on the board, folks. We are not out of this pandemic yet by any stretch of the imagination. So be careful out there. And we'll see you next Sunday night. Thanks for watching.